Welcome to Farmtek session 5, Embracing Change. One of the biggest things we hear is that change can be challenging, change can be hard. But we also hear change is necessary in order to grow. Sometimes we have revolutionary change where overnight it seems like business practices are revolutionized, completely different than what they've been. Or we have evolutionary change, where we're taking small steps on a daily basis to make big differences in the long run. Today, our goal is to really look at how do we work through change? How do we embrace it, manage it, deal with resistance, and use a change language that helps us get buy-in? Well, the first thing I always like to do is ask you, it's hard to change if you weren't ready. If all of a sudden I said, you know what, please give me your signature using your dominant hand, and you signed your name, and you signed it with ease. It wasn't too difficult. You didn't get a lot of stress. You just were able to completely sign your name. What if I automatically said, you know what, for the rest of the day, I want you to use your non-dominant hand, go ahead and sign your name, and take all notes in using your non-dominant hand for the rest of the day? How many of you be like, no way, I can't do that. That takes too much effort. This takes too much time. This isn't going to work. How many of you get into the mindset that it's too hard, I don't want to try? Change is hard for people who aren't ready. And asking questions as a leader, like, what would it take to change? You know, why are you fighting so hard to stay the same? These are some things that will give you insight as to what's happening in the mindset of your team. Oftentimes people fear change because they don't feel as though they're going to be good at it. Maybe they're nervous because it's outside of their comfort zone. Maybe they've been sprung the change quickly. They didn't get enough time to prepare. So questions like, if you keep doing what you're doing, what does your life look like 6 months from now, or 1 year from now, or 5 years from now? What changes need to be made? How many of you have changed something in your daily routine over the last 5 years? Why did you change it? Because you knew that you wanted to try to grow and be better at something, and you wanted a sense of achievement. That's why change becomes important. But there's also a set of irrational beliefs that a lot of times people will take. And the biggest irrational belief is, I'm not going to be good at it. It's not going to be worth my time. And that keeps them stuck doing things the way they've always done them. So we want to get outside of that stuck mindset. And we've got to understand that there's different stages of change. And as we look at some of these things, there's stages of change for us personally. There's stages of change as an organization. And we have to understand kind of how we work through this change. The very first stage of change is realizing that preach contemplation. We're not even considering a change. You know, I'm not willing to change at all. You know, so the goal that we want to try to do is start to look at creating awareness, raising some awareness. This is why we have continuous improvement teams. You know, what are some things that we could do 1% better? Because when you start raising awareness, you move to what we call contemplation phase. And that's where you start to see some of the possibility of change. But you're not certain if you want to make the changes yet. Well, maybe I should do this, or maybe we could do that. This is the should and the could stage of change. This is where we have to kind of resolve what we consider ambivalence. Well, you know, I could do this, but maybe it's easier just to keep doing what I've always done. Or, you know, that just seems like it's going to be too much work. I don't want to do that. But you know what, maybe I should do this because I think I can see that it's going to get better. So you're bouncing back into this, should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? When you get to the third level, which is determination, this is where you start to say to yourself, we have to, as an organization, be committed to make changes so that we can be sustainable. We've got to look at some appropriate strategies. You know, what are the small things that we can do on a daily basis to help impact the bottom line? You know, if we're trying to increase sales, can we call on 5 or 6 more people a day? What are those small things that we can determine that we're going to do, and we're going to say, hey, we want to grow the bottom line? When you start and get that determination that, yep, we're going to make these changes, then you got to create that action plan. What are those steps that are going to work? And when you're creating action plans, you also want to look at what maybe are some of those potential barriers? What are the steps we're going to get to take around those barriers? And that becomes key. And when you take action, you're constantly asking yourself, is this working? How can I change this? How can I tweak this? Maybe we need to stop doing this or start doing this. And how is it meeting our goal? When you get to action and you've started to, again, really implement the changes, then we got to look at maintenance. Have we achieved these goals? What do we need to do to maintain this level of behavior? What are the habits that we're going to keep doing? Or what are the habits we're going to stop doing? And then when you get to the final stage, which is recurrence is basically, again, looking at some of these consequences and what do we do next? Now that we've made these changes, we notice now we have to change this. It's kind of like the joke. Once you remodel a room in your house, you start to realize, well, now that that room's remodeled, maybe I need to remodel another room. And you start doing some recurrence and you go right back into that stage of change. When you look at these stages of change, we often tell people, you know what? People won't change unless they hurt enough that they have to change. A lot of times we're motivated to try to avoid punishment. And so if we might make changes because we don't want to get in trouble, or, we have to do this because somebody is going to quit if we don't, or, safety wise, we have to make the changes because it's not considered safe. People will change when they hurt enough or they have to. For businesses, maybe if they're losing market share, that can be a pain point that they start to say, well, maybe we need to do things differently. Realizing that people will change when they learn enough. Maybe we've learned what's working. Let's keep doing what's working. Let's make it 1% better. I've learned enough now about who I am and what I'm doing. I want to be better. You're taking these classes to learn more, to be able to increase your leadership skills that you want to change, to, again, look at that bottom line of how to be an influencer. People also will say, you know what? I change when I receive enough that I'm able to make the change. Do we have the tools necessary to make the change? Do we take a mindset that, you know what, I'm in control. I'm not a victim. I am somebody who is actually looking at this change as a possibility to do more or to be more or to grow the company. Again, realizing that these are the only reasons people will change. If you set out to try to change somebody, good luck. They've got to be able to have this internal drive where, again, they heard enough, they learn enough, or they receive enough. And when you look at that change process, you might automatically get some surprised panic and shock when you initiate a change. How many times have you gone through and had to do an update to a system? And you basically said overnight, hey, this is what we need to do because this is what's happening. We joke about the toilet seats. This is always a conversation in regards to change. Do you leave it up or do you leave it down? If all of a sudden you were used to having it one way and then we changed it overnight on you, would it be totally different? We will get some fear and some victim if we don't feel as though we've been included. You didn't consult me. You didn't give me enough notice. You didn't communicate it well enough. This is too much work. This is when you start to get what we consider blame or fear. Can I really do this? When all of a sudden we have sudden change, it will be worrisome for some individuals, and they might get into what we consider a victim mentality. If I'm announcing a change that somebody doesn't like, if I'm announcing a big change that people see as overwhelming, people might take that situation and jump into the mindset of, why are we doing this? It's not broke. Why do we have to fix it? Why can't we just keep doing what we're doing? This is too hard. I can't. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to. And you get that mindset of the victim. And when they're in victim mentality, this is when they basically say, you know what? I'm just going to complain about the change. I can't believe we have to do this. This isn't going to work. I'm going to tell you, can't wait to say I told you so. We want to get people into the agent of change, where their thoughts about the situation are, you know what? I realize that this is a change that needs to happen. I'm going to do the best that I can. I'm going to try to stay hopeful that this is going to work. If we have situations where all of a sudden we're going to try this, well, I'm going to try to be active. I'm going to set a goal. I'm going to work a day at a time. I'm going to do what I can to get it done. When you're an agent of change, it's easier to respond versus reacting to it. And when you, as a supervisor, as a manager, want to make changes, We want to follow this 5-step language, this communication process. The big thing is people want to know why this change is necessary. So what is the actual goal of this change? We want to upgrade our software because we believe it's going to be more efficient. It has more intuitive types of strategies so that our customers can use it more effectively. It's going to help us internally shut down some of these long processes that we've been doing. Whatever, tell them the why. What is the vision for the change then? What are we changing to? We're changing to this system. The system's going to be able to do this, this, and this. It might take us a little bit of time up front, but when it's implemented 100%, here's what we can expect. Here's what we're going to see, and create that vision for people. When you create that vision, you're now giving them a chance to kind of see that big picture and maybe get past some of that fear. I always like to talk about in that vision too, what are things that we're hoping to change and what are the things that are going to stay the same? Because anytime that we're making any major types of process improvement or change processing, we want to talk about what's going to stay the same. That's going to help reduce some of that fear. And then when you get that rationale, why we're doing it, and you create this picture, this vision of what it's going to look like, then what are our steps? And one of the biggest things I encourage you to think about is putting in a mindset that here's our plan, and we may have to adjust and change the plan along the way. Here's what we know for sure today. Here are the steps we're going to take in the next week. Realize that, this is a learning process and we may be tweaking this plan, but here's what's going to change. Here's what's going to stay the same. That becomes essential because a lot of times when we're making evolutionary change, it is progressive daily. We make a couple adjustments today. We make a couple adjustments tomorrow. We look at the plan. Is the plan working? Do we have to look at other things that we forgot about in the plan? Again, looking at that plan. What are we doing? Who's doing what by when? What are the barriers that might get in the way? And who's going to do what by when to reduce or break down those barriers? Keep that plan predominant. Communicate that plan as often as you can. Because if people are uncertain as to what the plan is, they start to create big stories in their brain as to what could happen. And also remember to talk about what's in it for them. What's the personal impact of this plan? Right now we're changing this software. It's going to take you a little bit more time up front. We're going to use a pilot project. We're going to work through and see some of these opportunities here. What's in it for you is more freedom of your time, because it's going to, again, in the long run, save some time. It's going to help with your efficiencies. It's going to help with creating an opportunity to communicate across departments. It's going to save you time, save you money, give you freedom, whatever it is that, again, that it's going to give as a personal impact. And the biggest thing is, who's available to help us during this transition? What are the resources? Who do we go to if we have questions? And are you giving the people that are resources a list of questions and common language? So people aren't going, I don't know what they're doing. This is what corporate told us to do. I don't know if they believe in it. Make sure people have that communication of change. Here's what's working. Here's what we're going to do differently. Here's how we're going to adapt. Here's what we're going to look at as a goal. Again, keeping those resources available. You also then focus on really this formula for change. We often talk about putting people on performance improvement plans. Those are change management plans. You're asking your staff, hey, if you keep doing what you're doing, this is what you can see happen. But if you change this one behavior, here's what we can see that's happening. And recognize the challenges for people. I realize that oftentimes we ask you to do different things. We may ask you to be more innovative. We might ask you to change some processes. It can be challenging. It can be frustrating, but here's why we do it. And here's what we're hoping to gain from it. Just validate people, recognize the challenges, but then set some realistic goals. When we set realistic goals, people sometimes say, yeah, but we got to constantly do stretch goals. Have a stretch goal, but then also have a realistic goal, because If people try to change and it's too hard, they want to quit a lot quicker and go back to their comfort zone. So try to set up small strategies or small goals along with your stretch goals. And those realistic goals, once people get momentum and feel like they're achieving those things, they start to feel as though they can make a difference and they get into what's called growth mindset. I might not be good at it yet, but here's what I'm doing to get there. The game of golf is something that's definitely something that's 1% better and a growth mindset. I'm not on the tour yet, but I'm changing, I'm adapting. And determine your why. If you're trying to make your own personal change, why do you want it so badly? Why is this important to you? If you're talking to your staff, asking them, why is this important to you? How do you see this as impacting your life? What is your why? Your why, when people get stressed out, is going to keep people focused. For example, the past year and a half with the COVID pandemic, the big why became keeping people safe. And when we talk about keeping people safe, it makes it easier for us to ask, well, am I being helpful or am I being hurtful in this goal? And once we get the why established, then it's what are the things that I can do on a daily basis to make it a habit, because change requires persistence and change requires us to make it a habit for at least 28 days. For example, if you want to test this number 5, making it a habit, change your silverware drawer for a day. Count how many times you go back to the old drawer in which the silverware was in. It usually still takes you about 28 days to realize that, oh, I've changed the silverware drawer, but you'll keep going back to the old drawer. Just like we'll keep going back to the old behavior because that's our comfort zone. How many of you have ever been promoted to manager or supervisor from the floor and you want to just go back and say, oh, I just want to put something together, or I just want to build something, or I just want to order fill, or you want to go back to the old comfort zone when it gets too hard. But again, small steps on a daily basis. Break down the big project into what can be accomplished in 5 minutes, what can be accomplished in 10 minutes, and also try to look at those outcomes. Celebrate what was done for the day. Oftentimes in change, people look at, oh, we still have this to do, we still have that to do, we still have this to do. Look back on what you have accomplished. Again, that's a mindset, and that's an embracing change mindset for people. And then really, use now what statements when things happen. Okay, so this happened. Now what do we need to do? This problem occurred. Now what do we need to do? This line stopped, broke down. Now what do we need to do? Are there certain things that we need to stop doing so that this doesn't happen again? Are there things that we have to start doing that this happens again? Again, looking at those now what statements and really focusing on your daily habit. There's a change readiness assessment that you've been given to really look at the 7 different ways in which people are ready. Some of us are more resourceful, and when we see things happen, we automatically look for things that we could do differently. Some of us maybe are optimistic and, hey, we love change. We try to change because we say every day, I want to be 1% better, and I want to be better today than I was yesterday. When you're looking at change readiness, you have staff members who are going to be maybe 100% ready and maybe down all the way to 5% ready. If you have a lot of resistors, again, we've got to go back to that formula of change language. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? What's in it for you? And here are the people that can help. And again, when you're looking at some of these things, we have to focus on what are we doing to be successful? When I'm being great during change, what am I doing? This is a great question. If you're putting in a process and people are getting frustrated, I like to ask, well, okay, if you were being great right now, what would you be doing? Well, I wouldn't be complaining about the change. Okay, great. What would you be doing? Well, I'll be doing this and I'd be doing this. Helping people see that, change is just constant. It's how we choose to respond to it. What's working for us? Okay. Oftentimes people want to look at the change and all the things that are going wrong so they can say, see, I told you it wasn't going to work. Instead of looking at what's not working, let's look at what is working. What were we able to do with this? How is this system implemented? And what can I do differently next time? Like I said earlier, we've got to demonstrate this growth mindset. I'm not good at it yet, but I'm getting there. And when you do that, you can help people move towards a commitment. You can help them make some informed choices, and you're building some more trust and empathy with people. And always report progress. At the end of the week, I would always encourage project managers to send out some type of communication that said, hey, this is what we were able to do this week. This is what went really well in this change process. Here's the goal for next week. Again, communicating what's working, because we automatically will want to focus on all the things that aren't working. And asking yourself, how ready am I for change myself? What is the goal? Is this goal positive? Is this going to help the bottom line? Is this going to help the way their culture is set up? Does it matter enough to you to make the change? How committed are you to make this change? Sometimes people say, yeah, I really want to make the change. But when they start looking at the steps that are necessary to do it, they're like, oh, wait, I didn't agree to that. I don't want to do that. It's got to matter enough to you. Do you feel like an agent or a victim? Do you have the resources? Do you have support within your leadership team? Is there some flexibility to be able to say, hey, what do we need to shift here? And the big thing people always want to say, I don't know if I have the energy for this. It takes a lot to learn new things. I don't know if I can do that. We've got to be able to be supportive and utilize the coaching wheel. What's the topic? What's the impact? What are we going to do? How are we going to get there? And on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being not committed to being 5, I'm all in. Where are you at? What's going to get in the way? How are we going to move past those things? And what's going to happen if we decide not to do this? What are the consequences? But the biggest thing is persistency. People say you almost need 100 days to make a change. And after that 100th day, look back on all the things that went well. And when you're looking at your own personal development plan as well, look at some of your own skill sets. What are some things that you're hoping to achieve? What do you want? This is a sample of a personal development plan that, people were trying to do in regards to positions. Maybe I want to be an assistant manager. Okay, great. That's a great goal. What are the action steps you need to take? Well, I'm going to try to improve some skills. I'm going to make sure that I'm saying yes. I'm going to try to be working harder. I'm going to try to get greater authority. This is when I'm doing it by. Again, creating your own personal growth. This helps with also supporting your employees. What is their growth plan? A lot of times we spend time giving performance feedback, but let's look at growth plan. What are their goals for the year? What are they expecting to gain out of the year? What action steps can they take? What are their criteria? How are you going to evaluate that? How are they going to evaluate that if they're successful? So those become some key things in just a development plan and personal behavior change. But if you're feeling a lot of resistance and a lot of attitude, like, I don't know why we need to do this, make sure you focus again on the why. Here's why this change is needed. And here's the big picture, and link it to other changes. The more we can create this compelling vision, the more people will say, oh yeah, I want a place like this. I want to be a part of this. I want to be a part of something bigger than myself. And what are the benefits for me? And what are the benefits for the change? And when you go through this change, I always encourage people to do some types of rewards, recognitions, incentives. We've been able to do this. We've been able to encourage this. And when you find yourself getting into resistance, communicate more. Oftentimes in change, we're not certain as to what specifically we're going to do. And we don't maybe want to roll it all out until we have the whole plan in place. But I'll tell you, the organizations that basically say, here's where we're at. Here's what we're going to do. Here's where we're going for. We're going to take it in increments. We're going to do phase 1, phase 2, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, just letting people know and communicate it often. People fear change, especially if they don't have enough information or they're not certain as to what the vision is, and they start to create their own stories. So communicate with their needs in mind. And again, as always, clarify what's not changing along with what is changing. And if you can at all costs, get people into decision making. If you have a system that needs to change, put some people on the pilot project. Give them a chance, give them a couple days to set up things. If you're looking at stations and trying to move the way you do things, how do they set up their station? Can they set up their station? Seek out, use ideas from their opinions. There's a couple groups that talk about, doing sessions where people are, here's the change that needs to be made. Give me 3 or 4 hows, and let's put those into action and see how they go. That's creating innovation. If you have resistance, maybe it's their aptitude. Maybe they have some fear that they're not going to be able to do this. Anytime you're teaching people new computer software, people get very nervous. Like, what if I hit the wrong button? What if I make everything delete? Oh, this is taking more time. I don't have this. Again, creating knowledge and skills for them, giving them the trainings that's necessary, creating opportunities for them to practice without getting in trouble. Sometimes people are like, what if I lose my job if I do it wrong? Those are aptitude things that people fear. And you want to, again, look at their workloads. If you're constantly asking people to keep doing things and then asking them to change, remember, we underestimate sometimes the time or the amount of time that change is going to take. So give people a little bit more time if necessary. And if you're helping or wanting to try to put institutional organizational change through, get some influencers who can support the change. Get some people who have influence with other people at all levels of the organization. Put them on that continuous improvement plan or continuous improvement type of process team. Who are those major influencers? How are they being directed by the change? Who are they directing? Are they responding positively or are they negatively? What are some of the things that are responding to? Is this group the majority? Who's more influential? Sometimes those negative Nellies are very influential. So getting them on a team to say, hey, you know what could work? What's it going to take to make this work? Not, is this going to work or is this not going to work? Don't put that question out to people. Put the question out, here's the change that needs to be made. What's it going to take to make this happen? Who's ready to make this happen? Who's ready to give me input on what's going to be the best practices to move forward? That is giving you some influence. Giving people ownership during change. People want to know in advance, especially if it's going to impact them. They need a little bit of time to know. And advance doesn't mean an hour. Some people will be like, yeah, it's fine. I can be flexible. No big deal. People want to know in advance, even if you're thinking about it. Hey, we're thinking about this change. Here's what we're currently looking at. If you have some input, please feel free to give that to us. Here's kind of our timeline. What are the overall objectives? Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? When's it going to occur? And again, showing benefit for them and asking people to stay open with their communication. Try not to take things personal. Change can be challenging. Change is hard for people who aren't ready. But let's just keep this open line of communication. What's working? What's not working? What do we need to do different? That coaching approach makes it so much easier to move through. And it's not about perfection. It's about progress. So when you seek progress that's moving in the way that you like, give people feedback on that. Encourage their enthusiasm. Keep offering assistance and appreciation. People will quit jobs if they don't feel appreciated or heard. So again, giving people ownership during change becomes key. So there was a session that happened. We were doing a walkthrough with an organization who for basically 10 to 12 hours a day had people standing in front of these boards. These boards, they were creating harnesses. And what had happened was there was some productivity that had gone down and there was errors that were on the rise. And so we did a walkthrough in the organization and we basically said, can you tell me what these harnesses are going in? And they said, no, I have no idea. We just put these things together and we just put these wires in, and kind of dissatisfied. When we started putting pictures of the vehicles that these harnesses were going into, it was amazing how people started to see a bigger picture. And they started to realize, if I don't do this harness correctly, somebody's house could burn down because the brakes might go out in this facility, in this rig. So they realized that these trucks, these fire trucks, these military vehicles, these harnesses were going into those types of vehicles, people started to be more cognizant of what they were doing because they realized that, you know what, my behavior could directly impact somebody else. But people will fail to perform if they don't know what they're supposed to be doing or how they're supposed to be doing it or why they need to do it. And if there's too many obstacles that they can't have control over, that can be a challenge as well. So remember, people change when they hurt enough or have to change, they learn enough and want to change, or they receive enough that they're able to change. And you might fall in different situations on this bell curve. 16% are going to be the people that are going to drag their feet and may stay stuck in the way it was. The rest, the early adapters, the middle adapters, they want to see success. Partner them up with people that are finding some success. Those late adapters, maybe they have a lot of fear of what's going to go wrong. I just want to wait and see. I want to watch somebody else first. So again, realizing that there is that normal bell curve that happens, but we've got to be able to help people see the importance of why that change is necessary. And when you look at stages of change for an organization, this is how we kind of move through our philosophies here. First of all, maybe an organization doesn't realize that they have to have any changes. You know, there's no direction, no priorities. Everybody's just kind of like doing things that they've always done. Then all of a sudden there's some information that starts to come in. Maybe you're hearing of a competitor who's doing something different. Maybe you had an engineer who created a new product and it's like, oh, let's try this. Maybe there's new ideas for process improvement. That information stage is just basically saying, hey, here's some things that we should really kind of maybe look at changing to help us be more productive. Then you start infusing some of these ideas and starting to go, you know what, we didn't wake up to be average. We woke up to be awesome. So what do we need to do to kind of infuse some of these changes? What do I personally need to do? You know, and early adapters begin to see the benefits right away of, hey, this change is going to be awesome. This is going to make my life easier. It's probably going to take me a little bit of work up front, but I'm ready to try it. And then you get into organizational change where basically it's, hey, you know what? Here's what we're looking at doing. How's this going to impact your department? Here's how it's impacting my department. What do we need to do to move together so that this is an easy transition? Transition is the key. Talking about transition language. Hey, if we have this go wrong, here's what we could do. Here's if this goes right, this is how we're going to move through it. Again, keeping that plan in place, that organizational change requires people not to get defensive, not to get frustrated, just looking at how this is going to implement and impact each of the departments. And once you get that plan in place, then of course you go into what we consider awkward application. You know, this is where we're trying to make those changes and rapidly trying to get people to shift into new mindsets. Just realize there's going to be mistakes made. There's going to be some times where maybe I don't do it the way I'd anticipated doing it. It's not a time to get people punished or, you know, hey, you can't do it this way. You're not doing it. Again, allow for opportunities for awkwardness. Allow for opportunities of mistakes. This is why a lot of times people will do testing prior to rolling out changes. You know, I want to do a pilot project first and I want to try it with these 3 people, see how it goes, and then we'll start to scale it. But realizing that awkward application is necessary. And if we punish during this stage, people will become very frustrated, they'll stay in laggard, and they will basically want to resort back to the way they've always done it. You've got to help them find some small successes in that application. When you get to integration, this is where, of course, the awkwardness begins to decrease. People are starting to accept the process. I realize this is going to be new. This is how we're going to do it from now on. This is how we're moving forward. And then ultimately you get into the whole cycle then of innovation and you go right back into, okay, what do we need to do different? What risks do we need to take? What do we need to change? And that whole process continues. So realizing that really change is about this coaching model, and I cannot emphasize the coaching model enough. Try to be supportive, talk about what the goal is, what's the impact of it going to be, what's the plan, what are the barriers, how committed are you to make this happen, what happens if we aren't able to do this, what happens if we are able to do this, and staying persistent. That's your key to success in change. And when you look at facilitating change, realize that we've got some opportunities. Some people may get into denial. I don't want to change. I'm not going to have to change. I'm only going to change if you make me or you threaten me. That's denial. Then you might get into some resistance. This is where people are trying to look at, where's resistance coming from? A lot of time the resistance is coming from the fear that people aren't going to be able to master the skill, or they might look less competent. Maybe they have imposter syndrome. But then when we move into exploration, this is where we start finding, hey, you know what? I really like how you did this. Here's 3 things that really went well as we're making these changes. Here's what worked. Here's what didn't work. Here's what we're going to do different. That exploration stage is an impact. And it's the one that's going to help your team move through and get into commitment. Because when you get to commitment, this is when you're basically putting together advocacy, you're helping people help other people, you're trying not to burn people out, you're giving constant feedback on what's working. Again, that's how you're facilitating the change. But people have to, again, move through these stages. They go through denial. I don't want to have to do this. I don't want to do this. They have the resistance of, you can't make me do this. And then you start saying, well, try this, or have you thought of this? Well, let's look at this. And then they say, oh, wow, this is great. I'm so glad we did this. Moving through it helps you look at the flow chart also of change management. Look at the readiness. Are you ready for innovation? Are you ready for big things? How motivated are you? And what's the data? What's the information that we have? What's our direction? What's the actual implementation process? How are we doing? Do we need to adjust? Do we need to adapt? And just that cycle continues. You're constantly looking at the cycle and continuous improvement. And that becomes key, because whenever we look at change, we've got to realize we've got to get out of our comfort zone. And our comfort zone is there because we feel safe and in control. Most people want certainty in their lives, but then they also want uncertainty because they might get bored. And so they want to make some changes. When you get to the growth zone, that mindset of, hey, let's look at anything, let's look at some dreams, let's look at some purposes, and we get to that growth mindset, we continue to move forward. But it's in the language we use, it's the attitude we focus on, and it's the habits that we take. So if we need to change our habits, we change our life. What is one thing today that you can change? A habit I always encourage is to make it a habit of doing rounds, checking in with people. How are things going? What's working for you? And again, just keeping that language of what's working. How are we growing? What are we learning? What are we doing? And that becomes the key to success. So thank you for being a part of the change management recording today. Look forward to sharing more in the future.